Hello everyone, this is Dr. Ilyas from the Department of Education, Hazara University, Mansehra. This presentation is aimed at discussing the various approaches to comparative education. So what are the different approaches that are adopted in order to compare education inside or across countries? So let's see a list of some of those approaches. Um, the approaches to comparative education include the statistical or quantitative approach, the descriptive approach, the historical approach, the scientific or analytical approach, the area studies approach, and the problem solving approach. And of course, there will be other approaches to this comparison of the education systems. And also, one thing should be noted that most of these approaches are rather inclusive rather than exclusive. And so there are elements of one approach reflected in the other approach and the vice versa. So let's see some of the details of these approaches. The statistical or quantitative approach, as the very name suggests, is actually based on the quantification of educational phenomena. For example, literacy rates, comparison of literacy rate across countries. Similarly, the number of schools or comparison of the number of schools in different areas of countries or inside one country or in different continents. The number of teachers, the teacher-student ratio, the infrastructure and facilities available in one context or another context. And most importantly, the educational budgets that are allocated in particular parts of the world to education and education related expenditures. So these are some of the examples of comparing education systems based on quantities or in statistical terms. Then we have the descriptive approach, which description actually means detailed presentation or briefing about certain things. So in the descriptive approach, what happens is that there is detailed description of the educational phenomena. So we can give an example of a book that was written by John Griscom, 1918 to 19, and he actually visited a number of countries in Europe, including the Great Britain, France, Holland, Switzerland, and Italy. And he wrote a book and described the educational systems in these countries. And that book was called A Year in Europe. So that was an example of a descriptive approach towards comparison. So he actually looked at the education systems of the different countries and compared them. And then Henry Bernards described the educational systems of the various states of the USA and foreign countries in the American Journal of Education. That also is an example of the descriptive approach to the comparison of education system across countries. Then we have another approach is the historical approach, which is actually a comparison of the education system based on their evolution over a period or a period of time or over years. So the question is how or in what ways have particular educational systems evolved. So the historical approach actually helps in giving us insight into the history of the shaping up of the evolution of particular educational systems across countries. So an example of this could be the comparative analysis of education policies. So how have the education policies of one country evolved over a period of time in comparison to another country, or of one state to another state? And similarly, the evolution of practices over a period of time in their historical and evolutionary context. Also, analysis of education policies and practices in the light of factors impacting them in a historical sense. So In a historical or evolutionary sense, what were the various factors that actually impacted the different education policies or practices in one country and in another country? And so um, this also is a very interesting approach to understanding the impact of socio-political changes over a period of time on the education policies and the education evolution across countries. Then the next approach is actually uh, the scientific or analytical approach. This method follows an empirical approach comprising of some form of research, design, data collection, and analysis. So this is in a way, a more empirical way of looking at things, and we can give example of this as comparative analysis, comparative empirical analysis of the factors of success or failure of part or whole of the education system of an area or country. So, what are the factors that have helped in the success of a particular education system? And so the researcher in this case goes into the field and collects data and analyzes that data, collects data through various sources and in various ways and means, and then makes an analysis of that data. And then that particular research design can be replicated in other contexts. And so, because this is a very systematic and scientific and analytical process, so that's why it's called the scientific or analytical approach to the comparison of education systems. And then we have the area studies approach. As the very name suggests, in the area studies approach, it happens that particular areas are studied for particular phenomena and in their particular contexts, and then they are compared to other areas. So, for example, a detailed analysis of the factors impacting the education infrastructure of an area. You can also call this case study, and so you can do different case studies and you can compare those case studies with an aim to understand the part or whole of the education systems in terms of processes and products. So let's say you take the impact of gender on education, or the impact of education on gender role in the society, and you take one country and study that as a case study, and then you take another country and study that as a case study following similar research methods. This will be an example of a comparison as area studies approach. Then the problem solving approach, as the very name suggests, in this approach what happens is that there is a particular educational related problem in particular areas, and so there is need to solve those particular problems. Let's say dropout as a problem, as an educational problem, and in this case what happens is that a particular problem such as lack of teachers professionalism or dropout could be dealt with by studying and taking insight from solutions found in other parts of the world to similar issues. So, how such a problem was actually dealt with and resolved in some other part of the world, and so what insights can be taken from that particular context, and from that particular steps that were taken in that other part of the world to solve problems here in our context. So the problem solving approach, the focus of the problem solving approach basically is at coming up with solutions in the light of solutions that have been found in other parts of the world. So once again, there is and there could be other approaches to the comparative education. But these are some of the most prominent approaches to comparative education. I hope once again this particular presentation might have led to some of the questions in your mind. So if you have questions, please don't shy away from asking those questions in the comment section.